Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats weekly podcast episode number 24. I am your host, Dan Matson, and this is the world's very first podcast to celebrate the art, craft, history, and tradition of white plastic boats. Wooden boats. Yep, we're all about wooden boats here, folks, not white plastic. Anyway, welcome to the show today, and today's featured segment is an interview with Brion Toss of Brion Toss Yacht Rigging. Brion is a legend in the rigging world, and I had a fascinating interview with him. You won't want to miss it. He shares a lot of cool things and stories and how he got in the business and talks about some wooden boats. So stick around for that. It's about 40 minutes in length. I'm pretty excited today. I'm heading north to Bellingham to do a couple interviews. I found a couple more people in the woodwork up there. One is Eric Freiberg of North Fjord Boats, and I found him through Google Alerts. He was written up in a little magazine called the Whatcom Publisher or something like that up in Bellingham. Eric's got a boat shop near Lake Whatcom, builds boats and sells them, wooden boats and repairs, and I'm looking forward to meeting with Eric. And then I'm also going to meet with Christine and Jeffrey Smith today and do an interview. They've got a wooden vessel called the David B, which is an old power boat that they refurbished, and they use it, it's a wooden power boat, and they use it to take people on trips all over the place. So I'm learning more about that and pretty excited to give them, not to give them, but to do an interview with them. So I'm looking forward to it. Well, I'd love it if you'd connect with me. You can go to my website, hookedonwoodenboats.com, and get information there and leave comments on my blog. You can also email me, dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. Or on Facebook and Twitter, look for Wooden Boat Dan. And now, just this week, I am on Pinterest, which is kind of interesting, or Pinteresting, if you will. So I'm on Pinterest as Wooden Boat Dan also. I've started pinning a few pictures up there. I'm starting to learn some of the lingo, and looks to me like this site is really getting popular. So I'm looking forward to using it and connecting with people there also. And I've got a voicemail feedback hotline you can call, 424-261-2360. The last time someone called that hotline was back in the 70s. No, I'm just kidding. Doesn't get called very often, but if you feel like leaving a voice message rather than email, you can call and do that. Okay, this week's listener feedback is from Jim Vibert. I think I'm pronouncing that right, Jim. I'm not sure. Jim subscribed to my email news list, which you can do also by going to my website, clicking on the button on the home page on the right-hand side there. And I send out a weekly, no, it's not weekly, it's more like monthly or every 2 weeks. I send out a little email with some information or news or maybe a cool video I've seen on wooden boats. So I would encourage you to do that. Anyway, Jim signed up for my email news list, and then he sent me an email and said, "Hi Dan, I started building wooden boats in 1956, but they have never found a cure for me. I own 10 boats, but 2 are fiberglass and 1 is steel." Well, we'll forgive you for the fiberglass and steel, Jim. Seriously, that's okay, because that means you're still 70% wooden boats, and we've got a cutoff of about 65%. So you're in good, man. He says, "My true love is my Amphibicon 25, which was built in 1956 when I was a sophomore in high school at the Mount Desert Yacht Yard in Maine. My affliction can be seen on my website, and his website is windwalkerboats.com, and I've also placed that on the show notes on the blog if you want to go to the website. He's got some cool stuff on there. And he says, currently I'm finishing up a San Francisco Pelican for a client in Topeka, Kansas. Glad to see you're operating a support group for like-inflicted folks. Jim Vibert. Thanks, Jim, for that note. Appreciate it. Jim, I actually posted a picture of the deck that you redid on a snipe on my blog. It's a beautiful job. You got some cool stuff on your website. Thanks for your note, and look forward to continue to connect with you. And Kansas seems like an odd place to build wooden boats, but you know, that's all right. Wooden boats can be built anywhere, I guess. Next is our interview with Brion Toss. This is really one of the funnest interviews I've done. Brion is a very energetic, thoughtful, and insightful guy. And you're going to learn all kinds of fun stuff from this interview. In fact, things like worm and parcel with fillet, turn and serve the other way, that's the kind of stuff we're going to talk about, which is pretty sweet. So let's roll the interview. Take it away. So it is February 14th. I'm sitting here with Brion Toss from Toss Yacht Rigging. Brion, thanks for coming to the show today.
Nice to be here.
I guess I came to you, didn't I?
Yeah.
You didn't come to my show.
Right.
It's great to be here in your shop. I appreciate you giving me the time to do this.
Yeah. Welcome. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. Yeah, it is Valentine's Day. I did text my wife and tell her I loved her, so
this is important.
And I'll see her later tonight, so that's good. Yeah, so you spell your first name Brion.
Yes.
That's Irish, different. It's Irish, is it?
Irish variation, thanks to my mother.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Very cool. So where are you from, Brion?
Grew up in Seattle, mostly.
Really?
Yeah. Northwest, primarily.
Okay.
Lived in Maine for a few years, but mostly here.
Okay. Yeah. Did you do a lot of boating as a kid? Did your family do any boating or sailing?
Closest maritime connection we had with my father was in the Navy in War II. As a radio operator, and none of that got through in my childhood. It's just I got obsessed with knots in my teens, and that led inevitably, I think now, to rigging, which is about knots as tools for greater subjects. Much greater subjects. I mean, knots are wonderful, interesting things to be involved with, and I could see you just spending a life studying just those splices, seizings, lashings, for their own sake.
Yeah.
But they really are means to an end, which has to do more with geometry, with physics, with resolution of forces. And that's where the real fun is.
Yeah.
Plus, of course, it all leads around to human beings. And that was a good thing to realize. That I often, in doing talks, I often mention that the one class in high school that I literally thought it almost out loud, I'll never use this crap. That was geometry.
Really?
Yeah. And it's now it's my life. I mean, it's this huge gift that we're given. People have done all the heavy lifting about how forces resolve relative to angles and how compression affects structural members and tension and shear and torque and all those things that, engineering is based on various aspects of geometry.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned as a kid you got interested in knots. Tell me about that. What was that like? How did you get interested?
In 1969, I saw a book called, it was about urban survival. And in it there were two knots, the sheet bend and the square knot. I don't know why those two, but they decided to put them in there. And all by myself, from the very bad illustrations, I figured out how to tie them. That's how, clueless I was. And I went to show off to a friend of mine, not knowing that he had grown up sailing a big Kettenberg sloop off of San Diego. And I remember him reaching over his shoulder and pulling down this blue book, the Encyclopedia of Knots and Fancy Rope Work by Roel Grammont and John G. Hensel. Still in print, I believe. And I remember opening that book, and it was this Alice down the rabbit hole moment, just falling into this book. Thousands of knots, of all descriptions, decorative and utilitarian. Terrible book, very badly illustrated and written. Photographs, murky photographs, and nebulous descriptions. But I was hooked. And the following year, my family bought me Ashley's Book of Knots, which is a great book, capital G, capital B. And I just started tying knots, a very hermetic existence, just holed up in various little places in the late 60s, you know.
Really?
Tying knots, fairly obsessively.
Huh.
Almost made a living doing fancy work for several years. Buttons and keychains and Turk's heads and such.
Oh, really?
And that led into more of a maritime crowd, and that led to the first wooden boat festivals in Seattle and Port Townsend.
Okay.
And that exposed me more to sailing per se. And well, you can tie knots basically in wire. They're called wire splices, you know, Liverpool splices. You can do wire seizings. And then what size should that wire be? Oh, there's a specific load to it. Oh, there's safety factors and angles of incidence, you know, and all of a sudden it turned into rigging. So the knots are this avenue into rigging.
I see. Yeah.
It's a good thing. Of course, those were mostly wooden boats, which is the subject that's dear to your heart.
Right.
So I might discourse just a little bit on this at these festivals, which I still attend and sometimes speak at. Wooden boat sailors are an aesthetically driven lot, as a rule, by definition. Their boats tend to be more beautiful, arguably the most beautiful kind of boat you can have. And perhaps as a consequence, they're not always so. Maybe they also thought they would never use that crap in high school, in terms of geometry. And there's a lot of misconceptions, I think, about wooden boats and rigging. And the biggest one I hear a lot is that you don't want to, put a good tune on the standing rigging on a wooden sailboat, because that'll make it hog, quote unquote. When you think about that, you'll see wooden power boats that hog. Right? Now, it's not like someone sneaks aboard in the middle of the night, puts a rig up, and tightens the turnbuckles to make a wooden powerboat hog. Right? So therefore, it's safe to assume that other things than rig tension causes boats to hog.
So define hogging for us, Brian.
Hogging is basically the bow and stern falling down. You get a reverse shear where the middle of the boat is higher than the ends. You might start with a regular shear where the middle of the boat is lower than the ends, but over time, the boat sags. And the reason it sags, kind of obvious once stated, is that there's less buoyancy at the ends than there is in the middle of the boat. There's still structure out there, kind of cantilevered out over the water, but there's not as much hull form, not as much buoyancy holding those ends up. So over time, the sheer weight will cause those ends to sag down on a powerboat or a sailboat. So, not a good reason not to tune the rigging. In fact, you could actually hasten the process, because if you leave the rigging slack, the boat tends to work more. It gets shock loads because the leeward side is looser, or even the weather side can be looser because people just make the rigging super loose. And you actually end up yanking repeatedly on the structure, accelerated loads that deform the hull over time. And this is what we're talking about, is what kills boats, wooden boats, over time. My friend Ed Luchard described at least a Carvel or a lapstrake boat, like a basket. Basically, it's a very carefully wrought, structurally significant basket with the planks running one way and the frames running another. And you fasten them as much and as closely as you can without making it ridiculously heavy. But it's still able to articulate, and especially articulate over time. And that, in turn, can contribute to hogging. So there are some considerations you can take to minimize the effect of rigging on a wooden sailboat, but making it super loose, I think, isn't one of them. And if the boat, and I think it makes it worse, right? And if you have a cold molded boat, or a stitch and glue boat, or even a cross plank boat, all those are things that minimize the effect of rigging on the hull. They're not baskets anymore, and therefore the rigging, when you do tune it, won't deform it locally. And here I'll bring there's hogging, and then there's also humping. And humping in this context is the chain plates are being pulled up by the rigging. Now that doesn't cause the ends to fall down, but it can put a localized distortion in the hull because the hull is yielding in the way because it's a basket.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can separate those two items, we want to do everything we can to prevent hogging, and maybe by other means, everything we can to prevent humping. Got to stop here. Christian, is it possible that taping could happen another time?
The taping could happen.
That taping, so we can do this taping? Okay. Great. That's fine. People like Herreshoff and others took great pains to try to eliminate both problems. But they had greater success, I think, with the humping. Things like, fastener and plank length patterns, size and proximity to each other of frames, floors, knees, tie rods, running double diagonal straps, especially in the way of the middle of the hull, and chain plates can help prevent both problems. Just try to make the boat, they can't stop it being a basket, at least if it's Carvel or Lapstrake built, but they can try to tie that basket together better to handle the forces. And then finally, the big thing to remember is that it's the boat that puts those forces on itself. That it's when you heel a boat under load in the wind, it resists heel. And it resists heel exactly to the extent that its geometry allows it to, or causes it to. If the boat is less stable, that is more easy to push over, it will put less load on the rigging and therefore on the hull.
I see.
Right?
Okay.
So if you want to build a stiff wooden boat, you'd better build it not just stiff, but structurally unbendable.
Because it's
less
going to take the
basket-like.
most force.
Yes.
Because of the way it's constructed.
So if you don't put the frames closer together in the way of the chain plates, if you don't put in strapping and tie rods and hanging and lodging knees, etc., then you're just saying, I'm going to put this load on you, and you can't do anything about it, and you'll just have to deform because you have no choice in the matter, right? So it's unfair to the boat. So if I get someone nowadays that tells me, I don't want to tune this boat, it'll make it hog, I can dissuade them of that error. And if they or I point out that we could still hump, then we can maybe address that problem. And one of my favorites, this happened several times now, people say, you tune my boat and now I can't open the head door easily. Right? And so I say, well, clearly I didn't put a huge tune on the boat, the wiring was the right size, the tune was not heavy. If you can't open the head door, that means that the boat can't take its own loads. And then I slack the rigging off and we go sailing. This happened twice now. And we're driving to weather and I go down and I can't open the head door. And they've both times said, oh yeah, it always does that when we're going to weather. And this just proves the point that it's the loads, if you tune it at dockside, should be the same as when you're underway, especially going to weather. You're not adding anything, you're just making it more constant, right? So that opening of the head door was not the result of the tune, it was a result of the boat's inability to handle the load.
I see.
I hope that's somewhat clear.
Yeah.
Now, if that's a problem for anyone, or if, like worst case scenario, actually on Eddie's boat, the garboard was leaking when we tuned it, just from tuning it. The garboard also leaks when he's going to weather.
Yeah.
Right? So this takes reinforcing, basically. But if you want to sailboat, you want to be able to make this an engine of power. You want to be able to handle the forces that the sailboat basically brings upon itself with your help. You take it sailing and you're just asking it unreasonable things. So make those reasonable. And take it worst case scenario. Years ago, I worked on a wooden schooner that in order to, on a misguided attempt to clear a Coast Guard requirement, they added ballast to the keel and made it deeper without modifying anything else. And somewhere off, I think it was Cape Hatteras, tore the keel out of the boat schooner sank on a delivery south. Everyone survived.
Oh.
They just fell off a wave, and they couldn't handle the extra lever arm that they'd put on the boat to make it stiffer, right, and therefore safer to handle more sail area easily.
Yeah.
But they had not compensated structurally for the extra power that they'd allowed the boat to absorb.
Oh.
Right? It'd be like, running 440 through a wire designed for 220, I guess. You just melt it.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
So we're telling the boat, here, we're making this bigger lever arm so you can absorb more power. Good luck. Right?
Were you on the boat when it sank?
No. Oh, I did rig it. We had just rigged that boat. Oh, man. Off they went.
Was that a tall ship? Or
I wouldn't call it. Actually, I'm not sure what a tall ship. It was a little schooner, about, 75 on deck.
Really?
Yeah. Too bad. Many years ago.
Man.
Kind of pretty, but a little rushed, and a lot of money going into that boat, but none of it going into geometry, basically. So, by contrast, currently the schooner Martha, somebody else, the crew there to talk to, currently hauled out for a variety of work, including a new foremast, and also a rationalizing of the ballast keel, the whole assembly of the keel, to make the boat stiffer. But they're crossing every T, dotting every I structurally. The boat will be not just stiffer than it ever has been, but structurally more knit together than it ever has been. And it has been very knit together. I mean, this boat, just 2 years ago, I think, won the Round the San Juan County race. This is a 103-year-old schooner, Crown and Shield design.
Yeah.
And it beat carbon fiber zillion-dollar sleds, boat for boat, in a wintertime race around San Juan County.
Really?
Yeah, won overall, won its class, and not just on rating, but beat almost everybody boat per boat, including these huge, high modulus sail rockets with 30 crew on the rail, as ballast. And here comes Martha, this antique Edwardian schooner, with the crew sitting in the cockpit very comfortably drinking tea, and nobody on the rail, and real bunks below, with a real stove, right? Oh, man. And that's what it should be. Yeah. And it can be done. See, they sail that boat hard, it goes to weather, and it doesn't leak.
Yeah.
It can be done.
Yeah. So obviously the original design of the boat and how it's built and the geometry of everything is super critical.
Super critical.
Yeah.
And then how people treat it subsequently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There are boats there aren't very many boats like Martha, because a lot of people successively getting the boat loses that. And this can be said of tradition in general, that a dear friend of mine once said that tradition is so you don't have to make 200 years of mistakes. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. And that we figured out later that innovation or creativity is you don't have to live with 200 years of mistakes. Mm. But it's really very hard to be truly creative. Somebody else has already invented most wheels.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the trouble is that some of those wheels that have been invented, we lose track of them and we try to reinvent them. Mm-hmm. Or we ignore, that was stupid. Why did they do it this way? It's obviously should be done that way, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then we just lose the advantage that somebody paid dearly to get, so often with their lives,
Yeah.
So the tradition, in order to keep meaningful, needs to stay alive. We have to keep rediscovering, why was it done that way? Does it make sense? Why? Why do you reeve dead-eye lanyards clockwise, for instance? Why do you worm and parcel with the lay and turn and serve the other way? Just about every wooden boat sailor, and most sailors I've ever met, knows that little ditty. Mm-hmm. Worm and parcel with the lay, turn and serve the other way, or some variation on that. Yeah. Nobody I've ever met has ever told me, could tell me why you would do that. And there's really good reason that somebody boiled it down and figured it out and then put it in a little ditty so that someone could remember it. Yeah. And that person, information tends to degrade over time. Yeah. That person told it to somebody else, and somewhere along the line, the rationale behind it got left out. Yeah. And then we're all just left with this ditty, right? But there is logic behind it. Would you like to hear it?
Yeah, actually. Yeah.
When you parcel, that is, you wrap it with tarred canvas or friction tape contemporarily, you're putting a waterproof layer on, and the wire almost certainly is right laid. That is, you're looking down the length of it, it spirals away from you clockwise to the right. And when you parcel with the lay, putting this kind of spiraling shingle on the wire, going from the bottom to the top, you're creating this little raincoat for the wire. And it's going with the lay the same way the twist of the wire is going, and it tends to lay down better, and it makes sense. And then when you get to the top of the wire, you turn and serve back the other way from the top to the bottom. And you do that against the lay, and that way two things happen. You don't disturb the parceling as much because the two are spiraling in opposite directions. So you're not like you're building slack ahead of yourself, loosening the parceling ahead of yourself.
Okay.
So everything holds together. But more than that, under load, a right laid piece of wire tends to untwist a little bit. And if you have served with the lay, when it untwists, it will loosen the service. And if you serve against the lay, when it untwists, it'll tighten the service. And therefore the service remains more intact and tight and weather tight. And if you serve really well and tar really well, then, especially when the wire is new and it's settling into place and untwisting a little bit, the service will actually get snugger, not looser. And therefore it will perform such a great service of waterproofing that it's not unusual that water will never even reach the parceling, let alone the wire underneath it. So you can see the parceling is a last-ditch kind of protective layer.
Yeah.
And then the galvanizing on the wire is just one more thin barrier before rust can start. So this is wonderful, and it's basically geometry.
Yeah.
This is based on.
Right.
So there's logic to that. There's other examples like why are the bottoms of topmasts square? Or why is anything? Why do spreaders swing on gaff schooners? And there's logic behind these traditional things. But if we just obsess on those details because that's the way it's always been done, then it's so easy to then misstep or misunderstand why it's been done and alter and innovate blindly, basically.
Yeah, right.
So especially in wooden boats, to get the most out of them or to help them realize their potential, I think it's good to keep aware of our roots, keep aware of why that database is there, why it makes sense.
Yeah.
Things are available to us.
So you've got me curious on the hogging and humping, if that's if you can visually see that from a distance of the sheer of the boat.
Yeah.
Can you, or is it so slight? Or, I suppose
It
there's
varies.
variations.
Oh, yeah, it definitely varies. Sometimes it's so slight that you can only see a deflection either. Well, the easiest way to do it is to get either right at the bow, right at the stern, and put your eye even on the edge of the boat, on the edge of the rail, and sight along the length of it.
Yeah.
You'll see much smaller deflections than you can see by any other means, which means you can catch them sooner. Ordinarily, hogging, if you get well off from the boat, and you can just start to see a little fall off at the ends. Humping is more localized. That might be, by the time you can really see it from a distance, though, it's getting kind of late. So I'd recommend sighting down, getting up close to the boat, or even touching the side of your face to the boat, sighting down the length, be able to see those things sooner than later. You could also look at the inside of the boat. Is the joinery moving? For instance, right? Is the head door always stuck? Does the head door keep getting progressively stuck? Are there other things happening?
Yeah.
Right?
I suppose at some point it gets so bad that you've got to do major repair work to the structure.
Although,
or not.
It can.
Yeah.
It can, although it's more an aesthetic consideration usually, at least early days.
Yeah.
It can be important if the rig is continuing to load the boat. If, for instance, you hump the boat from the rigging, that means the rigging has gone slacker, and then you're back to the shock load problem. Hogging is a whole other issue. Hogging just it happens for wholly other reasons. It is not related. That's why it happens to power boats as well as sailboats. Right? It's not about rigging. So if you get that out of the argument, then you've eliminated some noise and you get a stronger signal about what to pay attention to for the rigging. Yeah. So leaking garboards might be rigging. Humping might be rigging. The mast trying to go through the step might be rigging. Lots of things might be
Lots
rigging.
of different things. Huh? Yeah. So you have a wooden boat in your family.
I'll say.
Yeah, tell me about that rig.
Well, I hope you can hear more of this from my bride.
Right.
It's been in her family for about 53 or 4 years now. It's called the Lotus. It was built in 1909 in Seattle. It's 92 feet long, 93 on a warm day. And it's Douglas fir. It was built for a man named McMicken, kind of a local celebrity here at turn of the century. And he built it to take he and his family and friends from Seattle up to Alaska and back in the summers. Something that's done scores of times in the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
It's a grand Edwardian boat. It's on the National Register for its interior. It has one of the defining Edwardian interiors in the world.
Wow.
On this boat. Gorgeous thing. And Christian more or less grew up in the boat, took it up and down to Alaska with her dad numerous times.
Mm-hmm.
And it's now a foundation that she is running. And it's worthy of attention. People can see details of it at mvlotus.org.
Okay.
And I recommend it.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Very nice boat. If you want to visit it, it's moored off the boat school in Hadlock.
Okay. Cool. So tell me about some of the more interesting wooden boat projects you've worked on over the years, Brian.
First one that comes to mind, one of my favorite boats happens to be another crown and shield design, like the Martha. The only other crown and shield schooner I know of in these waters, the Adventurous, built in 1913, not far from where I used to live in Maine. And it sailed around the Horn and up to Alaska in search of polar bears for an heir to some Chicago taxi cab company. And they never found the polar bears, brought the boat back, and the guy just sold the boat to the San Francisco pilots. And it lived as a pilot boat for some years.
Mm-hmm.
I'll wait.
Larry Wyndham.
Okay, can we take a
Yeah,
break?
you bet.
Can you take a break?
So, the Adventurous.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of boats die because of ignorance, accumulated or otherwise. A lot of boats die because the ocean is not always a friendly place, and shore is even less friendly. Very few boats live, I think, because they're great. They are lucky, or I don't know, basically lucky. But the boats that are great do tend to live. They don't need as much luck, basically,
Yeah.
as boats that aren't as great. So some come to mind. The Alyssa in Galveston, Texas, an iron boat, for instance, from 1877. Out of all the square riggers, little square riggers that were really the soul of the square rigger industry, not big boats, not huge boats, but just little workhorses. That one's still around because it was a great boat. The Adventurous, I think, is a great boat. It sails amazingly well. It has a very nice motion. It's very friendly to people. It's beautiful. And it tends to attract good people. Mm-hmm. And there's something profound about that. That there's something magnetic and self-reinforcing about that.
Yeah.
So, for instance, the current organization, Sound Experience, that runs Adventures as a nonprofit sail training for youths and adults organization, tremendously competent, and not coincidentally, I think, good fundraisers, good organizers, take good care of their volunteers, and there's lots of volunteers, and very safety conscious. They're leading the way in rig inspection protocols and safety procedures in the tall ships fleet. The skipper was recently a featured presenter a week or so ago at the Tall Ships America conference back east.
Oh, wow.
In just laying out what they've been doing for rig inspection. And for instance, last year we took out their mainmast, did massive repair upgrades to the wood and ironwork on that mast. We put it back in. A couple, 3 weeks ago, we took out the foremast, and they're doing similar things. That mast was in better shape, but they didn't have to do it. It's in much better masts than a lot of boats that have that are still leaving their masts in.
Yeah.
They did it, and didn't just. I know one boat, and I won't mention its name, that they took its mast out every 3-4 years, which is unheard of. It's incredible frequency. And you might think that's due diligence. The trouble is, they took it out, but they didn't know what they were looking at.
Oh.
So they put it right back in. And, and one of those masts went over the side not that long ago.
Oh, really?
So in addition to diligence and care and enthusiasm and fundraising, they're also very interested in education and really keeping their learning curve up. And therefore, this requires an abject humility. You know, we don't know everything. We need to learn more always. You know? Mm-hmm. And that tends to help boats live. Mm-hmm. So I'd say that a remarkable boat is one that reflects the best qualities of civilization. And therefore tends to reinforce the best qualities of civilization. Nice. It's an ongoing way to keep the noise level down and the signal level up. Mm-hmm. And maybe the best parallel, the only parallel I can think of right now is I might seem kind of odd, but martial arts. This is something, again, that has a very long lineage and a very, if not utilitarian, then compelling reason to exist. You know, it's sort of like sailboats. And dashing and dramatic and exciting. And very often, one hopes most often, rooted in very gritty reality, in very serious requirements. If you don't do it this way, you tend to die. You know? Mm-hmm. You don't do it this way, you tend to sink. Right?
Yeah, that's true.
And like sailboats, like too many sailboats, I think a lot of martial arts styles have become so divorced from that original reality that although the form is still there, the function is increasingly vitiated. They're not even aware what real violence is. They have a beautiful and gratifying and exciting and sometimes useful form, but they have lost that connection that really is the wellspring that informs that art. Mm-hmm. And like sailboats, that form doesn't hide, the form shows those roots. If you just look at rig design and sailboat design, then you can trace back the meaning that informed those shapes and angles.
I see.
Right?
Yeah.
And same with martial arts. If you look at those katas closely enough, understand them, then you can understand what maybe helped originate those katas and why they're like that. And therefore you can recover the meaningfulness of that art.
Kind of tell a story, don't they?
They do, and it's a story right in hiding in plain sight, this story.
Interesting.
So that's one.
Yeah.
And on a smaller scale, there are contemporary designs, my favorite being Lyle Hess's, the best known for the fiberglass Bristol channel cutters. But a lot of his boats have been built in wood. Most famously, really, of those, of course, would be Lynn and Larry Pardee's boats. These are Lyle Hess cutters.
Oh, they are.
Their original was Seraphin and 26 foot on deck, and their current one, Taliesin, is just 32 feet, I believe, on deck. Huge boat for them. And again, these are boats that just are gracious and capable and handsome and tend to encourage and reward attention from their owners, right? Mm-hmm. And finally, I'll just mention one more. I don't remember the design. This wooden sloop, teak, varnished, up in Victoria. I don't even remember the owner's name. I do know that he spent a lot of time sanding and varnishing this boat. The hull was varnished.
Oh, wow.
Hull. And he was on a dock with, of course, almost exclusively white fiberglass sailboats. Mm-hmm. And he was out there a lot, sanding and varnishing and painting. And therefore, a lot of people were walking by him all the time as he worked on his boat. And people, apparently thinking this was the most original thing that you could think of, as they walked by, said, "Hey, beautiful boat." Pause. But a lot of work. And then walked on. And later on, somebody else would come by and reading from the same script, it seemed, beautiful boat. But pause. But a lot of work. And went on. And he got so he could sort of anticipate when they were going to say it and the pause, and then all they went on. Yeah. He just got this mantra day after day. And then finally, and it was irritating him, someone walked by and said, "Hey, beautiful boat, but a lot of work." And he looked up and said, "Yeah, but at least it doesn't look like a refrigerator." So,
that's
and it's true. It's beautiful, but because it's beautiful, it might tend to attract not just a greater amount of care, but a better quality of care.
Mm-hmm.
And that, bringing it back around to where I started, was to say that wooden boat owners tend not to appreciate the forces of rigging in their boats, sailboats, I'm talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't need to be the case.
Yeah.
And when they do get really clued in on that and respond appropriately, then everyone's always shocked how much better the boat sails.
Mm-hmm.
And doesn't hurt if the boat also lasts longer.
Mm-hmm.
It's not being so tortured by those forces.
Right.
So that's my hope anyway, is that beauty is not just skin deep.
Mm-hmm.
That the form of the boat can call up real analysis and appreciation for what great designers like Herreshoff and Alden and others understood. There's lots of others, Garden, and just on and on. I mean, you can just single anybody out.
Right, right. So do you get out on the water much yourself these days, Brian?
I untie a lot of mooring lines for people and wave goodbye and get really lovely emails from faraway warm places that we're going to probably visit sometime. But we get out in local sales for sure. I haven't made an offshore passage in some time.
Yeah.
Might be getting a ride to Hawaii this spring, but we'll see.
Okay. Do you have a boat yourself, a sailboat?
No, not anymore. Not at the moment.
Yeah.
No, we go out other people's boats, and a great variety of them, which is also helpful.
Yeah.
I like that variety. You really start seeing different ways of handling the same issues and successes and failure rates with different kinds of hardware. The effect of rigged scantlings and angles and such over that variety. So it's an ongoing learning experience. Really great fun.
So do you ever get on a boat and not think about all the forces and angles and rigging and everything?
No, you can't. I can't.
It's not possible.
No, it's like next time you pick up a magazine or a book, try not reading it. I mean, look at the page and try not to recognize that there's right. Of course not.
There's words there,
right? And I'm not sure that I would. I don't
not that's a bad thing. I'm just curious.
Bad thing, no.
How your mind works when you're out.
And that's what we try to inculcate in people in our classes. Like we teach a lot of different kinds of classes. Maybe my favorite current one is we're teaching Coast Guard rig inspectors how to inspect rigs.
Oh. And
something they were woefully untrained for until very recently. And as a result, there were some fatalities in the charter fleet, sometimes on boats they had signed off on just weeks before. So these guys are really hungry. They really want to do it right. I mean, they really care about their job. So our goal in this 1 week class, it's a pretty intensive class, is to make it so that they can't not see forces, and how they move through the rig and where they focus, and therefore where they're more likely to fail. That's a good thing.
Yeah,
that's a great thing. And mathematicians would argue that the world, as we are walking around in it, is simply a reflection of mathematical certitudes. That it's fair and appropriate to look at things that way. That's really not the only thing that's going on.
Yeah, right.
But music is mathematical, and poetry is mathematical, and rig design is certainly mathematical. That doesn't keep it from being beautiful.
Yeah,
I think if anything else, it can enhance that. It's another aspect of the beauty of it.
Yeah,
just as a badly designed rig is a dissonance. It's not that just the geometry is bad, or that the boat isn't sailing as well as it could, or that it's less safe. It's less beautiful.
Yeah,
right.
Interesting. Yeah, because every boat's basically following all the laws of physics when it's in operation, or even when it's not in operation.
Right, sitting at dock right now. Yeah, you could be hurting your boat leaving it at the dock.
Yeah,
it's true.
I think I've done that before.
Yeah.
So, Brian, we're going to wrap it up here. For our listeners, tell me about your business, what you do here, or what kind of business you're looking for.
All right. Brief commercial interlude.
Yeah.
They might want to visit briontoss.com. That's BRION, toss, like throw it in the air, TOSS.com. So briontoss, one word, .com. And you can see there's a catalog that has some books, tools, videos, climbing gear, various appurtenances for rigging, some of which we've designed or have built, some of which we just really like a lot and they might want to get them, some of which we modify a little bit, everything from fancy work to tuning to going aloft, that kind of stuff. A climbing harness that Practical Sailor rates tops of all the climbing gear made. So there's that part of it. Mm-hmm. And there's also a little forum called Spar Talk, and that's for basically questions that are too short to charge for. Consulting that I don't want to bother charging for. That's the easy question, all right. And either I or somebody in the world, some very competent regulars there, will answer for people. I recommend people visit that site. And then that naturally leads, I do a lot of consulting, everything from rig surveys to just out-and-out consulting. In the course of the interview, I had to pause a moment to talk with a guy who's coming in tomorrow to see about chain plates, masthead, mast section for a boat. Lots of consulting. I really like doing that. It's like a puzzle. I do occasional expert witness work. That talk about puzzles. This broke, this person was injured or died. Why did it happen? And that's a great opportunity because as I've learned over the years in that part of the business, an expert witness is not the weapon that the lawyers bring to trial to help trounce the opposition, although that can happen. By far more often, an expert witness is someone who, by bringing a clear picture of the forensics, as it were, of the situation, can help people settle things and therefore not need a trial. Can be definitive without needing to go to a trial, or at least be able to come to some sort of arbitrated decision. So it's a great way to see how information can help resolve problems. Right? What am I leaving out? We teach classes. If you're not in the Coast Guard, you can still come to our classes. We do regular weekend workshops called Rig Your Boat, every aspect of the basic details of rigging. That includes fabrication skills like cutting and drilling and tapping, measuring, calculating loads, selecting hardware, doing deck layout, that kind of thing, tuning.
And you've written several books that people
that's
can
right.
purchase.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, The Rigger's Apprentice is best known. Been in print since 1984 in various incarnations. Splicing handbooks and several more that are almost done now. We're working on several books.
Okay.
And quite a few videos on different aspects of rigging.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very cool.
I just want a little plug you people might be interested in.
Yeah.
We recently got a line of ditty bags from a young friend of ours who set up shop in Bali, and he is making the most beautiful ditty bags. I'll show you one on the way out. Show you a couple. And this little island of Bali. They're very high end, but it's like the Gucci of ditty bags. And fully functional.
Really?
Beautiful and functional.
Wow, that's cool.
So we're going to start carrying those. Just sold one today. They're like little art objects, the kind of thing. I don't want to sell this. I want to keep this here. So.
Very cool.
People are always welcome to be in touch or come by the shop. Just give us a warning.
Can you give me your contact information?
Yep. You can visit us at the shop. We're at 313 Jackson Street, Port Townsend, Washington, and the zip is 98368.
Yep. Your phone number?
360-385-1080. They can email office@briontoss.com.
Okay, very cool. Well, thanks for joining me today. Any parting comments you'd like to make?
I just would wish everyone good resolution of forces.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Brian, for taking the time to let me do the interview with you. That was a lot of fun. A lot of great information, very insightful, and it's fun to hear how you got into all this stuff. Pretty cool. Also wanted to mention that Brian's wife, Christian, has in her family it's a 90-some foot wooden vessel called the MV Lotus. It's a wooden vessel that was built, I think, about 100 years ago. And I'm looking forward to interviewing Christian in the future to talk about that boat and what her family's done with that over the years and get some of the gory details on that. So we'll be doing that up on an upcoming show here. Well, thanks for tuning in today, folks. It's great to have you on the show. Please connect with me when you get a chance, Dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com, or my voicemail feedback, 424-261-2360, or Facebook, Twitter, or Pinterest. Look for Wooden Boat Dan. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day. This is Wooden Boat Dan over and out. Keep the sunny side up and the barnacled side down. We will talk again next week about the most important thing in the world, wooden boats.